Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Straightforward. Super happy to be here today with Karol Wozniak, who leads Agile transformation globally at Kraft Heinz. So we're super happy to have you here, Karol.
Happy to be here as well. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. And amazing as it looks like, Agile continues to be a big topic and a big challenge for big organizations to adopt and to really live by, right? So we just saw a recent report from Forrester saying that agile transformation is still on the agenda of most organizations out there, which means kind of means two things to me. Like the previous agile transformations were not very successful. They had to be actually redone or rethought. Right? So and there are challenges associated because the transformation requires, as we know, deep changes in terms of an organizational design and mostly culture, right? So and those are the big ones, profound changes, right? Yeah, I'll love to hear your experience and your story and how we're approaching this at Kraft Heinz.
Sure.
Where to start, like how to start an endeavor like this of this complexity.
So I'm glad that there is this report. Please share it with me later on. I want to share with my boss. So Bruno, I think you're right because transformation is not a 1 year endeavor. It's a journey, right? So and I can see that not only in where I work, but also in other organizations. There is a growing maturity to the practice, right? So if you look at the past, it was a lot about frameworks and ceremonies, and I think that the conversations I am driving and what I hear from the market is the focus on driving business impact, which I think it's an important change, right? From method to business impact. And I know you believe in that as well because we spoke about it quite often, right? And in the last 2 years that I'm leading Kraft Heinz, Agile function, mostly what I've done was, to transform all the perspective of having an excellent framework and running pods to how can we bring the Agile approach to a more transformative perspective, right? How can you transform a global 150, year old company, CPG company with real constraints? We have real targets and a lot of complexity. And I think there's a lot of myths around it. And I think one of the myths I would like to talk about with you, it's that Agile is about tech, right? And I think Agile was practiced within the software development helm, but it's not anymore, right? And I think I'm glad that Forrester is talking about the evolution of Agile and how it's still relevant because that's what I see as well. And I see the application. It's nowadays is how can we apply Agile in a way that reshapes strategy, right? Turning strategy into execution in a more nimble, fast way. There's a lot of constraints, cost constraints in the company, time constraints. The context is very volatile. So how do we actually can make Agile work, to deliver results in a fashion that we haven't done before, right? And what's getting on the way, right? And how we know if it's working. I think those are the things that when I look at my own journey and Kraft Heinz journey, it's about, how we learn faster, and apply the learnings into our own approach so we can deliver more results.
Yeah, that as you said, is very aligned with the way we think about those transformations. Like, if you look at the history of agile, right? So was a method to kind of that word kind of mostly being used by startups to solve a very specific problem, right? So a problem of uncertainty to deal with uncertainty and the technology world, as you put it, right? So technology startups that were in search of how to create value for new clients that they didn't have. So how to kind of adjust to find product market fit in a fast way, right? So that we're living in an environment of VUCA, right? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and try to kind of operate in that environment where agility kind of was the tool to actually fight that uncertainty, right? To adjust, pivot until you find what actually works, right? So to your point, like how to actually create business impact, I think it's very important for when we talk to clients. Like it's important where you point your guns. So like where you're going to what do you need agility for, right? So in our heads, like you should be using agile in those parts of the business where you have that, where you have uncertainty, where you still not certain, where you need speed to respond to over changing, ever changing customer behavior, and you're feeling that your products and services are kind of you have a market gap there. You need to respond. You don't know exactly what they need to be, right? So those are the environments where actually agility can create real business impact, because it kind of brings that speed and agility and ability to adjust in environments of uncertainty, right? So I mean, to my point, like you won't get a lot of results applying agility to a back office, very stable, understood environment. That's not what it's for, right? So and and again, it's very hard to transform an organization that is successful. Like I always tell clients, like, if you're a successful organization, like I met like a Kraft Heinz, it's a very successful organization. Like how you transform something outside. If you're winning the game, how actually you go about kind of transform, an environment where people, I'm doing really well, and I'm killing it. Why transform? Right? So that was my second question for you. Like in an environment like this, where do you start? How to start? If things are going well, which most of the big companies, Fortune 1000, they're doing really well. It's we find like that's you have to kind of be very deliberate and thoughtful about where to start, because otherwise it's just you don't have the incentives in place. You don't have the motivation for people to actually to move, right? So what's your take there?
Yeah. It's not easy because although if you know agile and you've experienced the transformation it can bring in other companies, to bring it to a large company, uh, I can see a massive opportunity, but sometimes people see as a massive risk. As you said, if we're doing all right, well, I'm going to take the risk to adjust my organizational design, the way people work, and create this distraction for a while, right? So I think that one of the key things is it is important to have a burning platform, right? To choose where to start and what is relevant. But not only that, because sometimes you have a burning platform and people that are managing this business, they don't want to take an additional risk, what they see as an additional risk, right? So you have to be able to make it tangible. What gonna be the results you're gonna bring with this new approach, and also have someone that really buys in. And I think that is the key thing, because if people say, well, just like throw a sprint in it, I heard that, like, I just need a sprint, let's run a sprint. I need to do faster. I think you're missing the point, right? Because the way I see the biggest benefit of agile is about focus and flexibility, right? And not only speed. Speed is gonna come, but if you're not focused, if you have people, if you create a pod, let's put it like quotation here, that everyone there is like 10, 25% allocated and they're doing something else, you're not gonna achieve even the speed you want to achieve, right? But in high stakes context, sometimes people say like, well, but why? Why I'm gonna do this? What is the value that you can create, right? So for me, one of the things that I think it was harder for people in the first wave of Agile to get buy-in from the senior leadership was to make it tangible. And that the reason why, Bruno, I think is because a lot of people focus on the process and not in the outcomes. So, there's this myth. Oh, agile equals short sprints. Well, Of course, we run short sprints, right? But that is not the point, right? The point is to have more focus and flexibility. And then some people are usually, when I talk to my internal stakeholders, they think there's no planning. So they go the other way around. They say, we really need to have all the plan, detail that every 2 weeks until the end of the quarter and what's going to happen because they are afraid that they're not going to control, right? But actually, the thing is that the plan is made in another way, right? It's not a rigid plan. There is a living roadmap, but some people don't understand it, right? And I think, you know, I'm a strategy and transformation person, right? So when I look into strategy, I see that the strategy itself as function in a company is evolving, right? It's iterative. You gotta bring the learnings from these teams that are working on the ground to the strategy so you can adapt. But this is still something very challenging in large corps because we have very structured processes. And even though you have teams running in a different speed, sometimes, to connect to these existing processes is the big game changer. That's what I'm working on at the moment.
Yeah, that you touch on a very important topic, which is the connection between strategy and agile, right? So, like in our experience, we've seen the strategy from the 20th century, like the last centuries. It's kind of was very prescriptive strategy, right? So, and it will go too much down into the woods, right? So you see like a budgeting process and a strategy process kind of unfolding into, okay, so that's where we're going. So then kind of you start to kind of decompose and derive those higher goals into more tactical things to get into the teams, and you ended up very in a very tactical level. You get to the team level or department level when kind of is do breaking down strategy, and then we get, okay, this is what we need to do, and this we need to do is kind of list of projects, like, oh, you do project A, B, and C and D, and this is your scorecard for the year. And then there's the depth of agility right there, right? Because if you already have all the projects that you need to do, right? So what's your actually autonomy to actually respond and pivot and adjust along the year? And that's where we create, the zombie projects that we know today, because like, because they're why we're doing this way. Well, because this is in scorecard was defined, in October, November last year, right?
Yeah.
And so that there's a connection there, and we really kind of advise clients to stop the strategy on a higher level and kind of be more on the stop on the business goals level, and let the teams themselves, to your point, define the plans and design those plans that are actually going to deliver those goals. So they have the autonomy to stop things, to do experiments, to really have the autonomy to to define how to get there, right?
Yeah.
But stop on a higher level. So there's a clear connection there between how that agility operates, and how you deal with strategy, and which level of how deep you go into the woods of the strategy, right? So not sure like how you see this as well.
I think we really like working with OKRs in Kraft Heinz. And I think the good thing about OKRs is that we do them quarterly. So we don't have it OKRs around the globe yet. We have some pockets, some very important um, work streams that are working with OKRs. And I think that really helps to make its strategy a little bit more connected to the quarterly execution, which is great, and to be interactive. Uh, I think, as we were saying, transformation is a process, right? So when you start working with OKRs, people want to see what are the activities you're going to do in the OKRs and make sure that they are controlling the activities and all the activities are being delivered. And what I say is that, look, if the teams are working well, they're going to deliver the objectives, and you're going to see by the KRs that they are moving towards the right direction. And if they did the planning right and they are learning, they're going to deliver the activities needed for the quarter. So it's fine. Delivering what's planned should, make sense and should be something that shows that there is, good execution. But doesn't mean that we're going to deliver exactly the same things, right? Because as you said, right, we learn as we go. And I think one of the other myths that I find it very frequently when applying Agile to the execution of strategic projects is that people think you need a new team to do Agile. And the reason why a lot of people think you need a new team is because a lot of the business don't want to do the redeployment of the people that are already in the business to work in a new way. So they say, okay, hire new people. I don't have enough people. You'll never have enough people if you don't stop doing things you're doing today, right? And if you still work in the same way, trying to control the activities, right? Because you need to empower people, the team you have to redeploy them and you have to grant them focus, right? So I think one of the key things that I'm working at the moment is on this redeployment of people and bringing agility to the business usual is that some people they just want to fix like, "Oh, okay, this is business as usual. Don't touch it. Do the pods, and the pods are gonna work with very important things. And I'll tell you the allocation they need, right? And and then sometimes they go like, but I'm not sure what is the allocation they need, because, well, sure, you're not. So I think there's a lot of, when trying to apply agile beyond tech, there's a lot of things that we're still discovering, Bruno, right? And some, I would say, principles that when you're trying to do in scale, as I'm doing, you have to experiment and flex. Like, can I do a 70% dedicated team instead of 100% dedicated because there's 30% that still has to deal with the bureaucracy that exists or other things? Does this work? So the way I see, there's a lot of learnings, right? And I learn every day. And I think that probably a lot of the people that are trying to do agile transformation in our companies are also learning, that the principles and the practices evolving in itself.
And I'm very curious, Carol, like to your learnings around like the you touch on the one of the biggest cultural changes that are needed to actually deploy agile, which is kind of the giving autonomy to the teams, right? So that's a big one, and it's hard for managers that haven't had a career managing in a different style, right, in a more command and control world, to adjust to that, not just let kind of work on like a more outcome based, and not to manage the tasks and not even know what the tasks are, right? So that how how you're dealing with this, like how any lessons like kind of how to do this, because that's a big one, right? So how you operating there.
I think one of the things that I learned, and as I said, I am experimenting and also learning, and being challenged on my own principles because I get amazing questions. And I'm like, I didn't even realize those questions existed, right? And so I received a provocation on one of our leaders, and he said, "You should have a playbook on Agile." I was like, "What do you want a playbook in Agile? There's Scrum, there's Safe, there's a lot of things that guide us to do that." And then I understood that what he was asking me was actually to create a replicable way within our company that made sense for our challenges and people could understand. And we could have people being champions, right? And we could be the agile enablers and not the agile police, which I thought, it took me a couple of weeks to realize that we could create some boundaries and guardrails for people to, evolve and have this as a safety net for people that wanted to experiment agile, knowing what's going to happen. Hey, this is the plan, right? You start with an inception, and during this you discover what the problem is, and then you follow up to a boot camp where you're going to train people, you're going to create objectives, so to provide some reference of what's going to happen. I think it's one of the key learnings I had, that people can really grasp it and look in a PowerPoint and say, okay, this is what's going to happen. Fine, I get it, right? I will give you 2-3 days of my people to train them, and then yes, we will deploy them in working teams because that's the way that I understand how it works. And another thing that I learned is that there's not a one size fits all, especially when you go beyond digital products. So when you're thinking about physical product development, which we do, right? Well, a new flavor of ketchup, or how we're gonna launch, new sauce, you kind of have to go hybrid, mode, kind of a mix of agile and waterfall, because there are some things that have to go after another, and there are some what you could call bottlenecks that you have to, take into consideration for safety reasons, for, uh, manufacturing reasons. So I think that is one of the other things that was really cool for us. And also adapting learn language for the people that are working in physical products, because if you call them developers of a pod, people are like, why are you calling them developers? They're not devs, right? I was like, I had to tell my team, call them team members. And then like 2 years later, there's still people calling them developers. I was like, no, guys, stop. There's the people call them team members, pod members. The other jump we did, Bruno, was this enterprise agility, taking the 10YS strategy, plans that you said, the big strategy, and helping the sponsors to have a more nimble plan. And that is something we're doing with go-to-market, with product innovation, and using it principles, structures, and parts of the organization of Agile, but not having, the same, I would say, robust approach that you have to develop digital products, right? And there's also the other part of capabilities, right? So how do you embed what we know it's good, agile, some tools, some approaches to people that, as you said, it's back office. They wouldn't benefit from being, fully agile, but maybe they could benefit from a Kanban board, right? So I would say these four flavors that we have, the digital products, physical products, the strategic products, and the capabilities, is something that myself and my team, we found during the process of creating our, Kraft Heinz approach, customized agile approach.
Got it. And just curiosity, where do you start in those four fields? You start on the digital products, or kind of a more kind of the typical space to start, or where start on the
We start where the problem is.
okay.
We start where the problem is. So
Start from need as
yeah, we start from the need. So basically, I would say that in the beginning, it was in the beginning of our journey, it was hard, Bruno, because not everybody believed, right? But I had a boss also called Bruno, and he really believed it. And he said, let's start with who wants to start, so we have a proof point. And who doesn't want to do it, won't do it. And we started like this, especially in emerging markets, right? And it really worked because we had several different approaches. Not basically, we had two approaches in Kraft Heinz. We had the international zone that was everything beyond North America and North America. North America was very focused on digital products, like very safe, all the robust process approach. And international zone, we had less people, less money, and more freedom. So we did Scrum. And nowadays we have a blend of them. And it really, it depends on what is the problem that the sponsor brings to us. Another day we had the sponsor bring in a problem. He says, I need 5 different, digital products here to be built, and I need money, and I need the people. I said, fine, let me have a look at it. I said, for these 5 digital products you believe you need, 4 of them already exist. And the other one, we have to check it out. What are you gonna do? Because this might have. Oh, okay, fine. So it's really start from the problem and then try to find the solution.
Yeah, I love that approach because again, like the transformations in organizations that are successful, right? Like it's very hard, to your point. Like we have to recognize, any transformation program, we're asking people to work in a different way.
Yeah.
And for people that are actually, succeeding in their areas, right? They will perceive this as only risk for their work.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing well. I'm
Don't bother me.
I'm killing it here. Why you're bringing this transformation, into me? Like they will perceive this as only risk. So
Yeah.
we always advise clients, mainly if you have a an organization in crisis, then it's a different story. But if you have, if you're a success organization, our experience is like a start from actually where people are actually pulling you in, like where people kind of are open and willingness to kind of take the risk because they're either because they have a big problem that they don't know how to capture, they don't know how to solve, or they have a big opportunity that they don't know how to take advantage of. So, but they're open to work differently. They're willing to kind of pull you in, pull change, right? Because In the rest of the organization, don't worry of them. Like I love my other Bruno there, because that I think exactly like that, because don't worry about the rest, because they will be ready once you're successful, when you show the business outcomes that you mentioned, like when you show that impact. And then people start looking at their over their shoulder. What's happening there? Like, those guys are kind of they were sucking before, and now they're killing it. What they're doing different? They're smart people, and then they will start to to pull that change a little bit. I saw like and then we'll be open to kind of, I wanted to hear, but I wanted to hear more, right? I want to listen more.
Yeah.
Or what you guys doing that actually kind of brought you success, right? So that to your point, like, you don't multiply process and rituals, and people are not interested in that. People are interested in multiplying success, multiplying impact. So when you're talking about in that language, then you have people really interested in hearing what you have to say, right? Because I feel like most of the agile transformations in the world being kind of run and led by what I call the agile fundamentalists, people
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
people that are kind of people that want to talk in the on the agilist lingo, and get really upset when the executives and teams, they don't get it. Oh, they don't get it. They don't believe in it, right? So it's not a matter of believing it. It's a matter of kind of either we're kind of designing this for impact, or no one will actually care.
No, no, and it's a hard work, right? It's a very hard work. Even with progress, like, uh, we have more than 110 pods around the world today, right? And more than 2,000 people trained. 60% of our strategic planning is run, through some form of agile. So, we progressed a lot in the last couple of years. Right now, we are in a situation that I have more demand than capacity to help, which for me it's amazing. Means that we clicked somehow with some people, but we still have people that don't believe to the agilists, approach, and we say, well, maybe they don't believe because we haven't seen, and if they haven't seen, is because we haven't been able to communicate the outcome, right? And click with them or make it easier for them. So even when there's progress, there's still blockers, right? So large organizations that have usually a complex organizational design, they have to catch up. And some teams will want to work in agile, but there will be maybe some incentives that won't support doing so. So how do you flex them, right? And where can you flex them? Because sometimes you can't, right? There's the leadership behaviors, right? You said, if I'm killing it, I'm doing well, what brought me here, it's taking me where I want to go next. Why do I want to change, right? So, there must be some something else that it's meaningful for these people to believe in it, right? And I think we have strong believers in the company, which I think enable what I just told you to happen, right? So but it's not easy. Resources also something hard, right? Like, when you scale, people say, but do you always need more scrum masters or squad leads? Like, do I have to invest more, with more coaching, more tooling, more? I said, depends. We can retool, redeploy, prioritize. Then prioritization is hard.
I have a tip for you, like that we have done with some of our clients. Is actually get
Okay.
a CEO, or like a kind of very senior leader in a town hall or something, just to shed light in one of the teams that actually running agile, in kind of just just complimenting them for their outcomes,
Yep.
and that direct connection of the outcomes because of the way they work, right? So, because that's the point that not always get connected, right? Because if it's the outcomes are not directly attributed to the way that you did things, right? So,
Yeah.
you may be just doing well because you're lucky, because kind of that you launched the right product, you kind of penetrate the right market, not because you're kind of doing an agile, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
attribution, there's of course an indirection, right? Because between your success and the way you produce that result, right? So if you make that connection clear, and if it comes from a senior leader, then you create a little FOMO in the organization around the topic, right? So that's a good tip that we always kind of try to kind of coach our senior leaders. Kind of, you have an opportunity in a town hall or in a big thing, make that connection clear. Team X is just killing it because they're doing this, this, and this, right? So then you kind of creates that kind of interest and the FOMO in the rest of the team. But
Yeah,
let me ask about
makes a lot of sense. Thanks for that.
but let me ask you like about how you actually measuring progress. You gave us a little bit of that idea of the scale of the transformation, which is awesome. Like so it's a really big scale. Like how we're actually measuring, the progress of the program on an organizational level.
That's great. That is a conversation I had with my boss a couple of weeks ago because I think it's important and everybody understands how we know it's working, right? And I think there's a couple of things we debated that I think are relevant for anyone that is driving, agile scale global transformation, right? I think the first thing is to understand the scope of the work and what is that you're doing, right? So, one of the key things for me that shows that we managed to progress on the strategic scope is that we are working with the brands nowadays, right? We are doing product innovation, we are doing go to market. So, we are we are very much embedded what generates value and net sales for the company nowadays. So, this being embedded in the 10-year missions, they're going to transform the company. I think that is a very important indication. In my case, it is the 10-year, but it will be, connected to the most important things that are happening in the company, right? The second thing, it would be when you start seeing that some tools and frameworks that you had for the, agile teams, but other people are using it, like the OKRs. So, like people started asking us, "Hey, can you help that European team to have OKRs, connected to their strategic planning because that was going to be helpful, right?" So when you start seeing this spread company wide, I think that's another thing. It's not just one zone. It's just not one function. Uh, I think the scale, the number of teams as well. So in 2001 we have 57, and 2025 we are around 120. So I think that shows the scale of growth and interest. Number of people trained, I think it's another one because that talks about capabilities and how people are gonna deliver more value by what they do. Um, the spread between zones. So when we are driving global transformation, like North America is a very important market for us, but it has to go beyond North America, right? And nowadays, 40% of the pods are outside North America, which is disproportional to what the NSV of North America represents in the rest of the world, right? And I think some of the usual agile benefits like time to market, efficiency, productivity. So one of the things when I talk about people really understand that how it gets tangible, it's about innovation timelines shrinking. So this like, okay, so from 18 months to 4 months and a half, that's something we did with a product. Everybody wants that, right? Because then you increase household penetration, your net sales, they come earlier. So, that's a very good thing. Another thing that's very important, usually for team leaders and for HR, is the team engagement that really gets better because people have a purpose on the work they are doing, right? They see the connection of what they do to something tangible. So I would say that how we know it's working, those are the 6 metrics I mentioned to you. But if I had to choose one, it would be, are we really solving the real problems across the business that, need help with?
Awesome, awesome, Carol. That's been a master class of agile. Thank you so for sharing that with us. Maybe a last question for you, like what's your excited what are you excited about the future? What we're heading to in the next in terms of the the transformation or overall because in your work.
I think there's some things that I'm thinking about, right? And I sometimes think like, is this still gonna be called agile in the future, or it's gonna be called strategic execution? What is the name? I don't know. There are conversations about it, and I think that I'm not sure. So I'm still, I'm curious about that. Some things that I see happening that I hope they continue to progress is, people seeing agile not as a methodology rollout, but as a leadership choice and a combination of, you know, organizational structure, processes, and mindset. So I think this is the evolution I see instead of one thing. Uh, when people say agile is a mindset, I say just stop. Nobody's gonna listen to you if you say agile is a mindset, right? Or agile is a ways of work. This is an approach to deliver better results, right? Then you have to do three things: structure, organizational structure, processes, and mindset. Here you go. If one of those are, not working properly, it's gonna be harder. Another thing you mentioned when you mentioned, get the CEO to talk about something. I think more people are treating agile as a leadership choice, which I think it's important.
I love the agile as the leadership choice, and I'll write that down.
Thanks. And I think it is, it is because, Bruno, a lot of people say, "Yay, let's copy and paste Spotify," right? And they miss the context, right? Your problems, your people. So, as a leader, you have to understand where you are, start from where you are, and see what you have to do to progress. A lot of people just think about movement. They're like moving around, doing stuff, but what is helping us? Make sure that you're driving towards the right direction, right? And if you're not tying progress with, you know, the right direction, then you're probably just running faster towards chaos. That's not what we want, right? We want to be moving faster towards more outcome, right?
Awesome. Carol, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and learnings with us. Really appreciate it, and hopefully we can get you back soon here to talk about like maybe a year or so to see where you are at. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I would love to do that, and would love to keep the conversation going. Tell me, what you're seeing around with clients. What people are talking about agility. Send me the Forrester report because I'm gonna make sure to read it,
Oh,
and I'll be back in 1 year to say how we went.
thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Take care, Bruno.
Everyone.
Bye.